Rabbit tails, come and hear ya.
How are you, mate?
Hey Tim, how are you, mate? Hanging in there.
Very well. Few waves around this beautiful autumn weather, eh?
Yeah, it's a classic time of year around here, and yeah, it's just crisp, and the change of the season, and the autumn before the winter, and May, June, pretty good months around here generally, so it's stacking up okay.
Yeah, it's been looking nice out there. So we were going to talk about 73, 74 and the birth of professionalism in Australia. But first, you wanted to time travel back to 1971 and a famous session at Lennox Head that you thought was significant to this, yeah?
Yeah, well, I did, Tim. I mean, we've been back there a few times now, but 71 just keeps popping up. And it's because, I've been all around the world, and people always used to say to me, were you in Lennox in 71? It was just it's a real time capsule of the gathering of the tribe, the passing of the baton, all that kind of stuff. You got to remember 1971 was when Morning of the Earth was being made. Of course, Morning of the Earth just captured that essence, that spirit of surfing, the freedom of surfing in Australia at the time. And 71 was so amazing. There was this one particular swell, and I went down there, and there was PT had gone down with his crew. Michael Peterson had gone down probably solo, but the real fixture was that Nat Young and Batty Treloar were surfing there that day, and they were just huge figures in my life. I had befriended a young guy called Brad Myers, who back in those days, if you're down at Lennox or Ballina or Byron Bay, you actually surfed in the Queensland titles.
Yeah, right.
I know they don't want to hear that now, but and so me and Brad went away on a few Queensland teams together. We went to the Australian schoolboy titles. We became good friends, but I was particularly envious of him this day because Nat Young had taken Brad under his wing as his grom. And I said, well, this kid must be pretty good for Nat to do that. And he was hanging out with him, and I was really on the sidelines. But that day was incredible surf. That whole swell was incredible. This day was it was 6 foot plus. There was a few 8 foot sets. It was a good challenging day at Lennox. And, I'm surfing along, and my first encounter was I paddled for quite a wave that was hitting a bit wide, and I didn't realise I accidentally had dropped in on Batty Treloar, which wasn't the smartest thing in the world. And Batty was one of the kings. And Batty had this board. It was a red board, and it had this super hyper nose kick. And he was the king of the stall. Like he was the king of the kick stall. It's a forgotten art now.
Yeah.
But the kick stall would keep you in the pocket, and it was it was a really good, wonderful thing on the single fins. He might have even been riding a keel. I think Nat was riding a keel that day. No, Batty would have had a big rake fin that you saw in Morning of the Earth.
Yeah.
But that the fin wasn't the issue, because what happened was that as I took off on this wave, I felt this presence behind me. Batty did a kick stall and kickstalled me right up the backside. And that was my introduction. And so I basically got flipped off the back of the wave, and Batty continued on his way. So, there was no words or anything. No words needed to be said. The job was done. The rabbit had been turfed over the back of the wave. But that day was so cool. After that session, I came in, and there was Nat, sitting on the that beautiful, hillside at Lennox, and it was just a real country scene. He had his Afghan dogs with him, and he was sitting there. My friend Brad was sitting next to him, and went, well, here's my chance. I know Brad. So I went up and basically sat at the feet of Nat Young, and he held court, and it was just wonderful. But at that time, Michael Peterson was out surfing, and this was the real day, because MP was just, oh my God, he was just tearing it up like you wouldn't believe. Surfing just at such another level. He was the best surfer in Australia, and by 72, I think he was the best surfer in the world. But he was surfing on, and you can really clearly see he was the next extension of Nat Young.
Yeah.
And it was like, that was the passing of the baton. And then I got to meet Batty Trelaw as well. And so that day I went home so stoked. It was just a really watershed day for me personally and for surfing in a way. And I went home and, with a big welt on my backside, obviously.
Yeah. And I've heard,
you always say, we got Lennox in 71, and they don't say so much anymore because they're so old.
Yeah. I've heard Nat talk about that day, and he said it was the day he realised that MP was sort of taking his crown as the best surfer in Australia, and he was completely, well, he says he was completely comfortable with that.
He was.
It was undeniable, he says,
Yeah, no, very tribal. And that was in a different phase of his surfing. It was, you can see in the movie Morning of the Earth, I mean, he was into the free surfing and he was just in a different phase of his life. He'd won his world championships. He'd been Australian champion. He'd done all that. And he was in a different phase. And here's this young guy coming through that was being handled the mantle of the most, progressive radical surfer in Australia. So that was pretty cool. And I was just the junior grom once again, and along for the ride and having a fun time.
Yeah. And as we've said before, after that, all those elders just kind of disappeared off into the Byron hinterland and to find their gurus. And this new young generation of hungry young upstarts they weren't into feeding chickens and growing vegetables, were they? They wanted to win surfing contests and make some money.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, we kind of had our foot in both camps. So, there's no doubt about it. The whole, we're all kind of like, being dragged along in the whole hippie thing and all that. No one had any money, and you could live on $20 $20 a month.
Yeah.
And I found that whole thing very appealing. Like when Batty Trelaw went down to Ngowrie and they said, he was living in a treehouse or something. I went, wow, that sounds so good, I was going to, I had a cave set out at Dranbar that I was going to hide in so I didn't have to go to Vietnam. I mean, it was full on, there was a lot of things happening in Australia, but that was by 72, really. And of course, then we come into 72 and we did that last swing, and we came back from Hawaii and things really changed. I mean, I turned 18. I felt, with that trip to America under my belt, with a trip to Hawaii under my belt, I really felt like I was going to another level of my own personal surfing. And there was a really amazing time there, Tim, because as I said, like, PT definitely had his crew. He had the real clean-cut crew. He had the crew that really followed PT. Really, a lot of good surfers, a lot of really respected people around town. MP had his crew, and they were like the wildest crew of all times, his followers.
Yeah.
And I really didn't have a crew. So I was sort of on my own. I felt very much on my own. And there was this one particular bank that happened at Greenmount. And as, like in 1970, the Greenmount Bank went down the natural point. But a bank formed when we came back from Hawaii in 72. I was surfing this bank. It was a wide bank it's kind of where the super bank is now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd wait for the tide to go out, and at a certain part of the tide in the day, I'd surf it on my own. I was the only person surfing this bank, super fast bank, and I really felt my surfing come together, and I felt like I was breaking speed records. And that's when I started to really feel it. That, like I said, I'm really ready to go into this and have a crack at these guys at MP and PT coming into the next season with the Queensland titles coming up. But the very first thing that happened, I did have a little surf buddy. His name was Guy Ormerod, and Guy and I, he was a bit younger than me, but he was such a keen surfer. That we were kindred spirits. So we just wanted to surf all day long. And one day we heard, it was another one of those, Blues Brother moments where it was like another sign from God that it was announced that the Pa Bendel had passed away, and the Pa Bendel Memorial was going to be held at Caloundra at Moffat Beach in January 1973. And the first prize was $1,500, which was incredible prize money. And this was like, I went, wow, there's professional surfing. Yeah. So I at the last minute, I threw Guy in the car. We headed up, and what had happened was that I'd changed. Peter Glassett had made me these great boards of Joe Larkin in 72. the one guy that I did meet that came into my life that became part of my crew was Gil Glover.
Mm.
And Gil started making my boards in early 1973. His parents lived at Caloundra. We went and stayed there. And in that Parbendal, I felt really on. Like there was a lot of rounds. All the guys from Sydney came up, all the Narrabeen guys. I mean, everyone, all the bounty hunters were there.
Yeah,
$1,500 first prize. I mean,
a huge amount of money.
Oh, it was a huge amount of money. Pretty much a winner take all too.
Yeah.
And it went 1,500 first, 200 for second, 90 for third. That's how the prize money breakdown was. Anyway, I won every heat I went in. I was really in a dominant winning momentum. Then we got to the quarterfinals. I won my semi-final. These are 6-man heats. In the semi-final, I won my semi-final very clearly. Like it was like a peak performance. And it was back in the day where in a 6-man semi-final, if you won your semi-final, you went straight to the final. Second and third went to a repechage. Fourth, fifth, and sixth eliminated. So I'm already in the final. And then we went out for the final, but I didn't know Moffat Reef enough to know that the tide had shifted. The tide had come in, and the right-hander, which is the predominant part of the reef that I'd been surfing right through the tournament, was slowing down. And I went out there and I surfed pretty good. I certainly didn't have a peak performance like I did in the semi-final. I came in, but I felt like I'd done pretty good. And I hadn't actually seen a lot of the other guys. I didn't know where they were. I came in and someone said, "Oh man, did you see those lefts that Dick Harvey and Guy were getting and Cole Smith?" I was like, "What lefts?" So we had the presentation. Dick Harvey won it. Richard Harvey, he won the $1,500. My little mate that I'd thrown in the car at the last second, Guy Ormerod, came second, got the $200, and I got third. Like Guy had beaten me. It was unbelievable. But Richard had won the big money, the big $1,500, and But he was a great surfer and a great competitor. But that was one that I went, wow, I had that one all the way, and it got away on me. But it reinforced in me that I was really ready to go.
And of course, 73, you stepped up into the Opens, which pitted you directly against MP, and so relations there got a bit frostier, yeah.
Well, what happened was that we came back from Hawaii, and obviously in Hawaii, I was just the 5'8", the little mate still. I'd been close with MP since, I was 12. And then we got back, I turned 18, I was clearly in the Open division. He still owed me the $28 taxi fare from the taxi from Honolulu Airport to Rocky Point. That was not forthcoming, and I really needed that money. And so, things got a little icy there. But they really got icy during the Queensland titles, because it was back in the day where, this is like before the Stubbies, before the Quicksilver Pro, before all that, the Queensland titles was the big event in this state. It was, you won the Queensland titles, you were the king of the jungle. MP had won the Open men's in 71 and 72. I'd won the juniors in 72, moved up to the Open in 73. And then what happened was that over 5 rounds, and they used to have it at the best time of year in the best break. So they'd have it at Duranbar, Kira, Burleigh Heads, North Stradbroke Island, Point Lookout, or whatever was breaking on North Stradbroke, and then Peregian Beach on the Sunshine Coast.
Wow! So
usually it was held in very, very good surf, and we, lucking out at really good Burleigh and good Kira, all that sort of stuff. Great Duranbar, and I won the Queensland titles, and that really, made it, that put me in his crosshairs big time. Because by 73, he was definitely the best surfer in Australia. Yeah. And I'd just beaten him at home in Queensland over 5 rounds. So you could say it was a fluke that I got through and beat him in 1 round, but over 5 rounds, well. But the funny thing was that MP had won in 71 and 72. I won in 73 and 74. He won in 75. I won in 76. And PT got second all 6 years. which is unbelievable. Yeah, MP never got second in the Queensland titles. I never got second in the Queensland titles. PT got second 6 years in a row against us over 5 rounds, and which means that he was on top at times, Yeah, but right at, when it was actually the championship round, the last round of Kira or something, one of us two would win it. Which is pretty amazing when you think about it, like the consistency of PT, that he got second every year, even though it sounds like, oh, he got second. Like that means all the way through he's making finals, he was winning semi-finals, and just getting pipped in the final by someone putting in a slightly more radical performance or something, you know.
Yeah.
But it put me in that rivalry, you know, in amongst it all. But MP and PT had a fierce rivalry, but I think MP and I had a much more fierce rivalry. It got physical, it got full on. And, you know, it kind of served me well. It did set me up for pro surfing in many ways, you know, because I was competing against the most ruthless competitor that had ever walked the planet Earth. And plus the best surfer. You know, he not only could he surf well, he was a competitive animal. You know, he had arms that went down to his ankles. He could out paddle everyone, you know. And he had the psych, you know. He was the king of psych. You know, he would psych you out on the beach. I mean, in your face psych you out, you know. He'd come straight up to you before the final and just go, "You're a kook." Like, you know, like it was so cool. I mean, he had this glass on, these aviator glasses. I had a nickname for him, and you know, there was MP, the Surf Monk, you know, Reggie the Veggie. There was all these nicknames, but I had my own nickname for him. I called him Spooky Tooth. Yeah, that was my little nickname for MP, you know, because he didn't talk, you know, but he just had this vibe, and he had this psych, and he was never not psyching. Yeah, you know, he was so on it always. Every time we saw you, he was psyching you out. But him and I were surfing D-bar, you know. I'd go down to D-bar, say at 6 o'clock in the morning, and be waiting for someone to turn up, and it'd be MP invariably, and him and I'd be surfing a D-bar by ourselves. Because one afternoon I raced to the top of D-bar, and I looked down, and seriously, it was 6 feet. It was unbelievable. There was one surfer out there. It was Michael Peterson. I saw him take off in a wave in the middle of the beach, pull into the barrel. He connected that part. He connected the private bank part, and he came out near Lover's Rock in a barrel. Oh, it was just amazing. And I raced down, and him and I just surfed perfect D-bar for the rest of the afternoon by ourselves. It was incredible.
Yeah. And I remember you saying even his mum Joan would play a bit of a role in psyching you out. Wasn't there a story about you standing in line at the bank and Mrs. Peterson being behind you?
Yeah, well, see, I'd gone way back. I knew the whole family, and like, you know, I used to, you know, apart from up at the house with the surfboards underneath the house, the cut downs, and going up into the house and sitting in there while psyching up for a surf at Snapper, listening to Deep Purple and rock, and you know, Joan, Mrs. Peterson making a cup of tea, and while we're just like vibing and eating muesli and dried apricots and almonds, and like, you know, just in another world. And plus I knew them from Gil's Cafe, where we had their bally machines and the pool tables and all the, you know, and she managed that place. So I knew her well from there. Yeah. But she was, yeah, at times Joan was pretty scary. And one time I'm standing in the bank at, you know, I'm 19 years of age now, standing in the bank I was going to withdraw $5 out of my bank account. Mrs. Peterson's about 2 people behind me, and she said, "Rabbit, if you don't do it this year, you never will." And I was like, I remember going, I was just like, it just rattled me big time. And you got to remember, it nearly says a lot about the whole mindset back then. Like surfing was like swimming, you know, like you know, Nat Young and Midget Farrelly won their world titles when they were 18 years of age. You know, like it was like when swimmers, you know, Shane Gould, they broke world records when they were 17, 18. Ian Thorpe, when they're teenagers, they broke world records. And then really by 22 in swimming, you know, you're nearly old. Yeah. Well, it was the same mindset in surfing. Yeah. That like you're old by 22, you're ancient by 25. Wow. And that was the mindset. I mean, I never bought into it, but that was the mindset you're up against, you know. I mean, I remember later on when I was 30 years of age, and I was holding down the number 1 world ranking at 30 years of age. That was, people were aghast at that. They were going, "How dare!" One of the judges went, "The worst thing that could possibly happen would be a 30-year-old rabbit win the world title." So we'd expanded the mindset out to that. And now, of course, you know, you could be 38, you can be 40. You know, it doesn't matter. It's incredible. But the mindset back in the 70s was that, hey, you got to have it all done by 21. So that was a big deal.
And there was a sense that, professionalism was coming along, and, I guess it was a matter of, whether or not it was going to come along soon enough for your generation. Was that the feeling?
Yeah, well, when you're living it, when you're living it, it's weird. Like you don't really think like that, but you sort of know in the back of your mind it's got to hurry up,
Yeah.
because there was nothing going on. There wasn't much going on, and when Bells went professional in 1973, that was a sign. And the thing was that when you're living it, you sort of think it's never going to end. It's really weird. Like you're in the bubble, you think it's never going to end. But of course, in the back of your mind, you kind of go, well, I'd love it to happen, because after 1972, the World Congress in San Diego, that disintegrated. That completely disintegrated. And there wasn't a world tour until 1977. So there was 5 years in there where there was no world championship to go for. It was just, there was little sort of inklings of professional surfing happening in different parts of the world, and that's all there was.
Yeah.
But Australia was, there were some pretty forward thinkers in Australia, progressive thinkers, and particularly Doug Claw Warbrick and Graham Cassidy.
Yeah.
The Australian Professional Surfing Association was about to form. Claw, Doug Warbrick, the founder of Rip Curl, was definitely a futuristic thinker. And he was into, that side of it, developing pro surfing. Obviously, there was Fred Hemmings and George Downing, Randy Rarick in Hawaii, was establishing professional surfing over there at around the same time, if not a bit earlier.
Yeah.
But it was quite fledgling. And, Bells was a classic, because I remember I went for an expression session at Bells. And Jack McCoy had organised an expression session. And I remember walking up the stairs at Bells after the expression session. Jack McCoy was on the top of the stairs and he's handing out money. And I got up there and Jack handed me a $5 note. And I remember thinking it actually meant something to me. It was just a $5 note, but I was being paid to go for a surf. And that was the first time that had happened. So there was moments all the way along,
Yeah. And, of course, everyone talks about that first Rip Curl Pro in 73. And I think, Claw was in Hawaii in 72 after those San Diego World titles and saw the pro contests and became a bit of a protege of George Downing's.
Yeah.
But then, everyone would do the drive to Bells, but then you drive across the Nullarbor to Margaret River for the Australian titles for zero prize money, just for the prestige and the experience, yeah?
Well, as I said, like the big deal in Queensland was the Queensland title, and the Australian title was still the biggest thing, absolutely the biggest thing on everyone. If you made the team, it was hard to make state teams. If you made the state team, the Queensland team, the New South Wales team, the Victorian team, you were going to the Australian title rotated around the nation. In 72, it had been at North Narrabeen, and in 73 it was at Margaret River. And then I went with Richard Harvey and his wife Jan and Peter Townend, and I went. Richard picked me up when my mum's house. This is when we lived in Surfers Paradise, and he picked me up, and I left. It was going to be a 6-week road trip. I left with $15 and a fruitcake. That was my whole. That's all I had for a 6-week road trip around Australia. $15 and a fruitcake, and I came back overweight. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was just complete survival.
Yeah.
So it was such a pilgrimage, and we went to Bells. That was an amazing trip. That 73 Bells. The Claw had introduced the points for manoeuvre system. It was something that George Downing had introduced in Hawaii, or I can't be certain who did it first, but anyway, that's my. I think you're right though. Claw had been in Hawaii after 72 when MP and I went early, and then the rest of the Australian team came. Claw was one of the managers, along with Rod Brooks. I think Rod Brooks was actually living in his car on Sunset Point. You know, it was amazing. You know, like, these Australians just turned up in Hawaii, like just surviving on the land. Anyway, then we drove from Bells Beach to Margaret River across the Nullarbor. It was just such an exciting trip. We arrived in Cactus. You know, in 1973, there were 4 buildings in Cactus. You know, I mean, I went back in, I think it was late 80s, and there were 3 buildings there. So it was actually shrunk. And I was still very, very, very possessive of the place. It was like, I was going like, there's no one coming, you know, like you're in the middle of the desert, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got into Cactus, and we were sleeping in sleeping bags, and woke up in the morning, and PT had a little goatee beard, and, you know, the desert freezes at night. And PT's beard had turned into an icicle. It was, I mean, he was lying there with this icicle off his chin. The desert had frozen his beard overnight.
Classic.
And I managed, there was only castles, outside castles. It was a super fun way, super sharky, super gnarly. And somehow, there's only 3 of us out. I somehow managed to run PT over. I don't know how I did it. Got a cut in his leg, he's bleeding, and you know, we thought maybe it's a good time to go in. And then the next morning, Reno Abellira was surfing caves by himself. He was over there making a movie with Paul Witzig called Rolling Home.
Yeah.
And Reno, we got to meet Reno that day. It was really cool because he was one of my absolute heroes. And Reno was surfing out there by himself. I went out there and surfed. You know, when we're traveling around Australia to these gnarly breaks and without leg ropes, no leggies, you know, just we didn't know any difference. Anyway, I took off this super vertical wave on this board that MP had made me, and I ate it, and I didn't make the takeoff. It was super gnarly takeoff. It just didn't make the takeoff. Came up, board's gone, and I couldn't work out where it went. And it had gone in, and it had gone in a little current around the corner. And by the time I got to the beach and walked out on this rocky shelf to see where it was in the middle of this the scariest looking channel you've ever seen in your life. We're now around in another bay away from Cactus, in another bay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this break. They call it Super Tubes. It was a pretty amazing wave. But, and I had to make that decision whether I was just going to let that board go out to sea or swim in and get it. And that was by far the scariest swim of my life, because I realised that was my gun for Margaret River. I had to have that board. Yeah. I only had apart from that, I only had a 510 to go to Margaret's with. So I swam out and got that board. But it was just a very exciting trip. You know, we're eating abalone, and we're, you know, living off the land, living on, you know, Cactus was so amazing, and there was no one there. Yeah. And then off to Margaret's we went, you know. It was so cool. And we got to Margaret River, and the first 10 days we were there, it was like 20 feet. It was absolutely massive. We're staying at Yallingup car park, and just trying to imagine riding these waves. You know, we're the only caravan in the whole caravan park. One caravan there, ours. And we had to go and find, the waves were so huge. It was a monster swell that just kept coming and coming and coming. It was May 1973. And we found this other break, we you know, way around the corner called Rocky Point. But you had to go through this farmland to get to it. We got there, we surfed it, we were stoked, and I got the blame for it, and probably right, because I was the last to leave the car to go out. And somehow I had lost the keys to the car, or something had happened. I don't know whether I'd locked the keys inside the car. But it was a brand new car. Richard didn't want to smash the window, and I didn't know. But the spare set was back at the Yallingup, you know, caravan park with Jan. But there was this storm brewing. This is before you could see. There was nothing on the forecast, no radar, no, you know. It was just this massive storm was coming, and it was like a cyclonic storm event that hit us just on sunset as we were trying to make our way on foot to this farmyard about 5 miles away, and we just got absolutely destroyed by this storm. And PT and I tied each other together, you know, because we couldn't see, and you know, there was animals coming out of the bush, and it was wild. It was a wild experience. around midnight, we finally got back to the caravan park, and the wind had taken the caravan from one side of the caravan park to the other. It had lifted the caravan up and taken it, and Jan was inside the caravan, and we opened the door up. She was hiding under the table. She was absolutely terrified, and that was all part of the excitement, you know.
Wow.
But MP had made me this board for Margaret River, for big Margarets, and it was about an inch thick. So, I mean, look, I'm not saying that he, you know, I mean, I'm the Queensland champion. I'm still getting boards for Michael Peterson, and he made me a board for Margaret River that was like an inch thick. And I remember getting caught inside on about a 12-foot day, and I just got caught inside and just completely destroyed. And, and that was it for me. You only need to get caught inside once at Margaret River in a heat, you're done. You're so done, you know. But anyway, Richard Harvey ended up winning the Australian title. He had an 8'1". Yeah. You know, he was smart. He was older. He was experienced. He was smart. He took a proper board over there and dominated, and it was big Margaret River. PT got second. You know, it was so classic. MP got third.
Wow.
And I mean, I came about seventh or something, but it was a really fantastic trip. So good.
Yeah, amazing those early road trips with just no resources, but I mean, that must have been guys coming from all over the country in similar circumstances. Yeah.
Oh well, what was happening? I mean, a whole lot of guys came from Queensland in these really old, beat-up cars. It was like some sort of rally, you know.
Yeah.
It was like some sort of rally across Australia. Except these guys, the guys from the Gold Coast that came, this carload of them. What happened was that they went across the Nullarbor doing runners at petrol stations. Now, it all sounds like a really good idea, except on the way back from the Nullarbor, it's the same petrol station because there's only one. And the guy who ran the petrol station went, well, they're from Queensland, they'll be back.
Yeah.
Because he was telling us his car, and I went, oh, yeah, I know that Valiant. I know exactly who's in that car. And they'd filled the tank up and done a runner, thinking they'd killed it. And the guy went, no, they'll be back. They got no choice.
Through. No.
Oh, man.
They weren't going to go back around the top end, were they?
They were never going back around the top end. There's no surf up there. And plus, you just get lost. No one had ever made it home from up there.
No.
But but we're all living in this caravan park, and like there were parties, and there was drug squad raids. It was just so outrageous. It was incredible. You know?
Yeah.
You know, it was a fun trip.
Yeah.
73 Margarets was unreal.
And a real transition era for surfing, I guess, because, you know, Bells had gone professional. By 74, you had the Coke contest, and there was this movement for surfing to be trying to kind of clean up its act and be seen as a respectable, legitimate sport, but it still had this kind of underbelly, you know.
Oh, wow. It sure did. But you're right. I mean, you know, the real breakthrough event really, 74 was really another watershed year, because Graham Cassidy was really he was the father of professional surfing in Australia. There's no doubt about it. He was, I mean, Claw was, Doug Warbrick was a visionary and a real progressive thing. But Graham Cassidy was actually an administrator and a promoter. And he established the Tourism Coca-Cola Surfabout, which was just an amazing event. You got to think about 1974. It was the richest event in the world. I mean, in 74, it was about $20,000 prize money. It was total prize money. It was incredible prize money. Yeah. They paid all the way down. Everyone got appearance money, which is amazing. It was a mobile event. It had a waiting period. It was held at the absolute best time of the year in Sydney. It was really it was like the dream tour.
Yeah, yeah.
So concept in 1974.
Wow.
And it was an amazing event. And that first Coke contest, the Surfabout, got incredible surf, like absolutely amazing surf. I remember this one session we pulled up early in the morning, and it was like 12-foot ferry bower, and it was huge. It was 12-foot ferry bower. had the contest out there that day.
Yeah.
I remember surfing with Batty Trelaw that day, and we were surfing up. There's a spot around the corner called Winky Pop, and it was like 10 feet solid. And it's, you got ferry bow and this Winky Pop waves just like gnarly. And I went, no leg ropes, just no leggies. It was just full on, and big narrowbeam and big everywhere. It was an amazing event. And I'll never forget the presentation. Nat Young Nat came 5th. No, I won't. Yeah, Nat got 4th or 5th. I got 6th. Nat got 5th. No, sorry, Nat got 3rd. I got 5th. Nat got 3rd. And he donated his prize money. It was his prize money was, I think, $800, and he donated it to Gough Whitlam and the Australian Labor Party. And it was like this massive, like, wow, man, this guy is, he's donating $800 prize money to Gough Whitlam. Yeah, which says a lot about where he was at the time.
Oh yeah, there's a famous photo of Nat on stage at the Opera House at one of Gough's rallies with all the Labor Party luminaries, and yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah,
it's incredible. And of course, Gough Whitlam was a real hero. He was such a hero to us. Yeah, because he pulled Australia out of Vietnam. And it was a very unpopular war by 1972. No one in the world, wanted to be there. It was really like, it wasn't like, a war that anyone was winning. It was just like, it seemed like a useless sort of thing to be part of. Yeah. And obviously so many Australians and Americans had been killed. It was horrible, And there was that full anti-war movement going on. And Gough Whitlam pulled Australia out of Vietnam. Gough Whitlam also gave free university.
That's right.
Which was huge. That was so huge. It made tertiary education accessible to that generation that is now running Australia. Yeah. I mean, he was such a futuristic prime minister. And we love Gough, probably Gough Whitlam and Bob Hawke were probably two, most, popular prime ministers ever, they're amazing. Yeah. Just so Australian,
Great characters, yeah.
Just characters, just full on characters, But anyway, but MP was so unstoppable in that, but see, this points for manoeuvre system was so amazing because, for someone like MP's sort of whole approach was kind of frenetic, and he had worked it out. He had got his single fin board. He made a smaller fin. It was more like a pivotal fin, and he could just do so many more manoeuvres with this. And plus he had his carving surfing down. You get more waves than everybody else, and it was just on. Every time you took off on a wave, you got points. Yeah. You got points for every manoeuvre you did. And I mean, no one dominated a system more than he dominated that system.
Yeah.
And he won that first. He was the best surfer too, like by far. And he won that. That first Coke, he won bells. He won that. He won the Australian titles. I mean, that was the unbelievable year where he was untouchable. Yeah. Even though I did beat him in the Queensland titles, and Tom, his brother, said, in 73, he said, you will never do that again. And then next year I did it again, beat him in 74. But he was best surfer by far in Australia by then. Wow. I'd say in the world. I mean, there was no world championship, but I think in 1974, Michael Peterson definitely would have been world champion, if there'd been a world championship for sure.
Yeah. And so by 74, with, 2 pro contests in Australia, starting to attract more international competitors, there must have been a sense then that this pro surfing thing was really starting to manifest. Yeah. Could you see your vision starting to kind of materialize?
Yeah, I did, Tim, because Graham Cassidy, that's right. I mean, see, in 72 and 73, Hawaii had, the Smirnoff Pro, it had the Pipeline Masters, it had the Juka Hanamoku Classic. There was some big events in Hawaii with prize money. Graham Cassidy had, Enclaw had invited the best Hawaiian surfers and American surfers to Bells, but particularly to the Surfabout. So, you know, you had Jeff Hackman, you know, you had Barry Canopuni, Jerry Lopez, Reno Abellira, you know, the great Hawaiian surfers all in Australia competing, Rory Russell, and it really made it, you know, gave it that international flavour. It was just so cool, you know. And Al Chapman came, you know, it was classic, you know. And that, you know, there's no doubt about it. Like, plus banking the prize money, you know, you could, you know, the prize money then was being used to, say, saving up to go to Hawaii at the end of the year. Or using the prize money to buy a ticket to Bali mid-year or something. And so that became the beginning of the international surf trekking for us, you know. But Bali, you know, there's no doubt Bali and Hawaii were the two desired destinations, that's for sure.
It was around that time you did your first famous tax return that was returned to you by the taxation department?
Well, that's right. A friend of mine had said he was a young accountant. He said, look, you know, you can run a business in Australia at a loss for, you know, 5 years or something, and claim a loss on your taxation, and sometimes you can get money back, or you can just write it off and against when you're going to make a profit in future years. You could offset it. And I said, well, that's right up my alley. I said, this is me. So I duly filled out the tax return. I noted the surfing, the pro events, the surfing events I was going to, my expenses, my living expenses, living away from home expenses, traveling expenses, and at the bottom of it, I'd made a tidy loss. And then there's a bit of prize money to go with it though. There was $600 that I'd won at the Surfabout in Sydney. I'd won $300 at Bell's, and at the bottom of it, I signed Wayne Bartholomew, professional surfer. And about a month or so later, I got a letter back from the Commissioner of Taxation in Australia. Dear Mr. Bartholomew, there is no such thing as a professional surfer. It was like P.S. at the bottom, get a job, you bum, you know? Like, now that's a letter I wish I had to this day. I remember I was a bit shocked when I got it going, okay, they're still not quite taking us seriously here.
No, they're probably quite happy.
At the same token, I did have to do, I worked at the Grand Hotel in 74 to get my final money. I got a job for 2 months to get my money to go to Hawaii. So I still had to work. I worked as a janitor in a hotel. And I remember one time it was around, I was going to go to Hawaii in early November, 74. And I remember in October, it was after the football season in Sydney, the Sydney Rugby League season. And there was a footy tour that came to the Gold Coast and in Coolangatta, and they stayed where I was staying. And you know, they were seriously on a major bender. And at some point, they decided to have a shit fight. And literally a real one. And the next day, I had to go and clean it up. And that's the day. That was a big motivation for me to make it in pro surfing. I went, I never want to come back to this job again. And I definitely won't be, I'll be definitely avoiding rugby football teams.
Some things never change, eh?
Well, you know, but this is back in the animal days. The surfers were just as like, it was the more outrageous an animal act you could do, you know, the more kudos you got. You know, everyone would dare you to do something more outrageous. I mean, surfers was right up there too. I mean, there was all, you know, that's just how it was.
And
outrageous.
We might talk about that next Hawaiian season next time, because 74, 75, that's a pretty...
that'd be great, because that was the year that we all really came in, you know, in busting down the door. Sean Thompson, 74, that's when I went to Hawaii. He went to Hawaii to take on the North Shore, to really give it a go. We were 19 years of age. It was a time when you're 19 years of age. I mean, that's why they make jet fighter pilots 19 and they send them in, because you're 12 foot tall, you're bulletproof, you're fearless, you think nothing can ever happen to you, and you're just going for it. And that's where we were all at. I mean, So 74, that was the year we really first had to charge that new generation, you know, Sean Thompson and Mark Richards, you know, Peter Townend, Ian Cairns, Mark Warren, Michael Thompson, Bruce Raymond, you know, that crew really had a crack, you know, and that was the beginning of a whole new chapter, really.
Yeah, fantastic. And before we go, I thought we should mention, coming into winter, you've got a new wetsuit sponsor, keeping the pro surfing dream alive still to this day.
Well, yeah, it's the reinvention of the bugs for sure. And I've got the Nev behind me; that's part of it. Yeah. But the Coastline wetsuit, I mean, there's this front zipper vest that I wear that is the most comfortable vest I've ever worn. I mean, I love the front zipper. Yeah, like, it's so easy to put on. You don't need to be a contortionist, and it's so warm and comfortable. I absolutely love it, Tim. It's just so cool. Yeah, they got some cool wetsuits.
They're out of New Zealand, so they know about cold water, yeah?
They sure do. Yeah. And I mean, look, you know, a lot of wetsuits are all made out of the same factories, you know, but I mean, you know, it's like the days of you know, when we come to the other side of this thing, the days of families being able to afford a $700 wetsuit, I think they're over.
Yeah.
You know, these guys are very competitively priced. Coastlines they're going to be right in the market, and they're super cool wetsuits.
Yeah, fantastic. And working with a lot of great surfers too.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, Hippo's been part of the team over there. Bo Young, super cool. You know, that's a classic connection there, because you know, his father was such a hero of mine and a dear friend. In fact, Nat and I did a charity thing for Surf Aids, you know, that great, you know, surf group that looks after to try to out, you know, malaria and the Matawis and all those really good things they've tried to do in this fundraiser. And they introduced Nat. They introduced Nat as the grandfather of surfing and me as the godfather of surfing. And we had this super funny breakfast with all these lawyers, this lawyers group from Sydney. It was a fun day, but yeah, I mean, I've always admired Bo, you know, because Bo's got that, you know, he's got the, you know, the family tradition, but he's just got his own great style and great vibe about him. Yeah, you know, that's super cool. Yeah, there's some really good crew there, you know, and it's great to hook up with Nev again and be doing some fun things.
Unreal. Oh, well, I'm already looking forward to the next episode, 74, 75 in Hawaii, the backhand attack at Pike. So we'll keep our powder dry for next time.
Unreal, Tim. Good talking to you, mate. Take it easy, and everybody, you know, hang in there. We'll get through this.
Rabbit tails, come and hear a yarn.